C.C. DeVille, the man who wrote the riffs that propelled Poison to the top of the Billboard charts, was originally selected to take Slash's place. He was also responsible for everything falling apart in a matter of minutes during a fateful night at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards. He dropped his guitar jack during a live broadcast, played the wrong song, got into a fistfight backstage, and was expelled from the band that same evening. However, success is never achieved by itself. It brings with it ego, drugs, booze, and nights filled with loneliness, hallucinations, and screams. In the very world he once commanded, CC went from being a shining star to an outsider. However, that fall was not the end of his story. Who exactly is CC DeVille, then? Just a Brooklyn kid with a guitar and a dream too large for the harshness of Hollywood, or a careless artist caught up in the maelstrom of parties and drugs? Let's explore CC's story. DeVille. A catastrophe, followed by a resurrection. A convoluted trip where the darkness within was never sufficiently illuminated by the stage lights. Additionally, in the last chapter, a CC. DeVille, who had lost everything, never gave up trying to get back. Childhood, CC. Born Bruce Anthony Johannesson, DeVille was born into a working-class Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York, on May 14, 1962. His mother worked in retail, and his father was employed in service. In a neighborhood where the evening soundtrack consisted of honking cars, the smell of petrol and the muffled arguments from the flat next door, they tried their best to give their son a secure upbringing despite their lack of wealth. Bruce didn't have a quiet upbringing. He frequently characterized himself as a strange, solitary child who was constantly absorbed in his own world. Bruce shut himself in his room, buried in the radio and stacks of old vinyl recordings by Kiss, the Rolling Stones, Lou Reed, and David Bowie, the quirky icons who sowed the seeds of revolt in his mind, while other kids played ball in the garden. His parents silently divorced when he was 6 years old. There was no yelling or legal disputes, only a void that left a deep void in the heart of a tender youngster. "I learned to scream via the guitar since no one at home ever really heard me," he once recounted. His mother gave him that first guitar as a vacation present, and it became his best companion and his only way to cope with the sense of abandonment. Without an instructor, Bruce began playing the guitar at the age of 5. Just a strong inner drive and no official training. He replicated every motion of artists he saw on TV, taught himself chords from vinyl sleeve inserts, and rehearsed until his fingers burnt. The stage was the only place he ever felt fully seen, and music became his personal religion. Bruce wasn't an idiot, but he wasn't a very good student either. He had a renegade intelligence and was more interested in dissecting song structures than in working out equations. He joined in New York University's music program after high school, but the demanding coursework and performance expectations couldn't quell his inner need to push the boundaries. His family was disappointed when he left school after just 1 year. However, Bruce believed that it was the only way to remain authentic. In the end, he abandoned the name Bruce Johannesson and departed Brooklyn. He set out for Los Angeles, a city full with perilous traps and dazzling stage lights, with only a few $100s and an old guitar. Bruce was reincarnated as CC there. DeVille is now a fire seeking a stage on which to blaze, rather than the lost lad from Brooklyn. Early career CC DeVille brought only a battered guitar, a few unfinished demos, and the unwavering conviction that he was meant to be a star when he first arrived in Los Angeles in the early 1980s. Then, LA was a battlefield as well as the sacred site of rock and roll. Hundreds of guitarists were eager to give their all on stage for a fleeting moment of fame, and every nightclub and street corner served as an unofficial audition stage for the Hollywood dream. CC wandered around from band to band. No contract, no name, and no obvious future. After playing with a band named Screaming Meanies, he joined the mid-tier glam rock band St. James. However, he always carried a defiant attitude and a crazy energy with him wherever he went. People may not recall the songs from modest Sunset Strip performances, but they will always remember DeVille's guitar loud, arrogant, and ready to blow up at any second. But there was a well-thought-out plan hidden beneath that mayhem. CC realized he wasn't Yngwie Malmsteen or Steve Vai. Technical skill wasn't his life. His charisma was his lifeblood. He transformed the guitar into a storytelling tool, a performing weapon, and an extension of his body. DeVille was the player you just couldn't ignore in a scene full of gifted but unmemorable players. Then the chance presented itself. The up-and-coming band Poison held tryouts in Los Angeles in 1985 in an attempt to replace lead guitarist Matt Smith. One well-known applicant was Slash, who would go on to become a legend with Guns N' Roses. Slash, however, was left out. Poison's glam aesthetic of hairspray, makeup, and dramatic flair was not compatible with his gritty manner. C.C. DeVille then entered. In addition to giving a crazy audition, he performed a unique riff that would later be used as the opening to Talk Dirty to Me, the song that made Poison famous. Later, Bret Michaels remembered, "I knew we were hearing something different the moment C.C. hit that riff. Unpolished, untidy, yet lively." C.C. was selected. He went from being a vagrant making ends meet in seedy clubs to becoming a full-fledged member of a band on the rise. He also brought chaos, paradoxes, an intense lifestyle, and the first sparks of a fire that would eventually consume the band itself. He didn't simply bring his guitar, either. Poison's successful career. C.C. joined Poison in 1985. DeVille stepped into the heyday of glam metal, when everything was over the top. The hair, the guitars, the feelings, the rebellion. Not only was he the lead guitarist. In the four-man lineup, he was the most dangerous spark. The component that set Poison apart from the mass of faces coated in foundation and hairspray bands. Even though their debut album, Look What the Cat Dragged In, 1986, had a minimal budget and low expectations, it was their first major hit. C.C. was the author of Talk Dirty to Me's iconic opening riff, which would go on to become both Poison's defining hit and an anthem of the glam metal era. Additionally, he helped write songs like I Want Action and I Won't Forget You, demonstrating his talent for creating straightforward yet powerful tunes that the benevolent youthful fans of the day couldn't ignore. He wore tight leather clothing, had spiky hair, and was burning BC. Rich guitar, C.C. was a living performance as well as a musician. Poison's second album, Open Up and Say, 1988, marked the beginning of the late 1980s as rising rock royalty. Sold more than 5 million copies, propelling them into the top bands in America. By that point, DeVille was well in control of his role and was making an impression with his flamboyant riffs and solos in songs like Fallen Angel, Nothing But a Good Time, and most notably, the #1 ballad Every Rose Has Its Thorn on the Billboard Hot 100. DeVille was the driving force behind the poignant guitar breaks, even though he wasn't the main lyricist. Success continued to flow, transforming what may have been a corny love ballad into a heartbreaking hymn for a generation. Poison's attempted musical maturity was demonstrated by their third album, Flesh and Blood, 1990, which combined hard rock with more in-depth narrative. DeVille was instrumental in creating the unique sound of songs like Unskinny Bop, Life Goes On, and Something to Believe In, despite growing conflicts within the band. He could imprint the song on listeners' memories with just a few notes played at the appropriate time and with the proper feel, without the need for ostentatious solos. Ironically, the man known for his excess was the one who exhibited restraint. On the stage, C.C. Poison's internal combustion engine was DeVille. He broke every performance guideline by jumping on amplifiers, spinning around, playing with his teeth, and pointing his guitar at the audience like a rifle. He lived in the present and drew the audience into a universe where rock was a noisy, rebellious way of life rather than just music. His charm on stage was unmatched by anyone else in the band. He was the epitome of Poison, beautiful, chaotic, and unrepentant. However, the first cracks appeared right then and there, beneath the cosmetics and lights. DeVille was becoming more and more enmeshed in an unmanageable lifestyle. He would spend hours disappearing into the toilet, which made recording sessions drag out. He and Bret Michaels quarreled about set selections, volume levels, and even who was the real face of Poison during performances, which heightened tensions. Once a component of his attraction, Cecé's personal volatility had reached an intolerable level. C.C. DeVille undoubtedly contributed to the sound, image, and recklessness that made Poison a glam metal classic, though. Alongside industry titans like Mötley Crüe, Def Leppard, and Bon Jovi, the band's first 3 albums with him sold over 15 million copies in the United States. But the drop is always terrible, just like any prolonged high. Additionally, for C.C., the end didn't come slowly, DeVille. In a way no one anticipated, it happened in a single night and was live broadcast to millions. Conflicts peak and dismissal. The spotlight that had once made Poison a rock star was now blazing the same people who had ignited it by the early 1990s. Behind the scenes, a silent struggle was intensifying daily, even though the chart continued to show the band's success. And C.C. was the one at the center of it. DeVille. DeVille's feud with lead singer Bret Michaels progressively deteriorated beyond repair. Music was not the only thing that divided them. The raw, instinctual turmoil was something that one wished to maintain. The other leaned towards a more recent hard rock direction in search of expansion. The simplest nuances caused them to argue. On stage, who received more attention? Were the vocals overpowered by the guitar? even about who was the first to enter the studio. And even the smallest disagreements may become into full-fledged conflicts when both egos were fed by cocaine and heavy whiskey. As acknowledged by Bret Michaels in his book Nothing But a Good Time, CC. I was intoxicated and high. He struck me. I returned the blow. His guitar was so loud that I couldn't hear myself singing, so we got into a fight. Everyone was being worn down at the time, and none was sober enough to maintain their composure. Tensions escalated to the point of physical violence during the 1991 tour in support of Flesh and Blood. DeVille and Michaels got into a violent altercation backstage at an event in New Orleans. The band had to postpone their upcoming performances due to the severity of the situation. Everyone was aware of the poisoning rumors that started to circulate in the media. Should a bomb be on the verge of detonating, CC? The ignited fuse was DeVille. Then it did blow up. With millions of people watching live, Poison performed their new single, Unskinny Bop, on stage at the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards, one of the largest televised music events in the United States. They wore their trademark gaudy costumes. But everyone stopped when the music began. It wasn't just an error, DeVille was playing their old hit, Talk Dirty to Me, instead of the new song. It was a public insult to the band, their marketing strategy, and the polished image Poison had cultivated. When DeVille's guitar jack broke during the concert, things took a terrible turn. The noise stopped. The show fell apart. An unusual occurrence in the history of the show occurred when host Arsenio Hall had to come out and reintroduce the band. DeVille and Michaels got into another altercation just backstage. If security hadn't stepped in, blood might have been shed. There was no official announcement or band meeting that evening. CC. DeVille was immediately expelled from Poison. A few months later, during a live pirate radio broadcast on Saturday night, the consequences intensified even more. During an interview with Bret Michaels, DeVille abruptly interrupted the show, shouting at Michaels and challenging him live for his public comments. Lines that slice like knives were quoted in the Los Angeles Times recording of the conversation. You stated in USA Today that you were looking for a guitarist who did not use drugs. I wasn't talking about drugs, you were talking about me. I was referring to a person who was capable of maintaining mental clarity. And you acknowledged that you were no longer in charge. Although the on-air altercation was never formally aired, the tape quickly became widely known in the music industry. A sign that one of the 1980s most poisonous founding alliances had finally fallen apart. From then on, CC disappeared in Poison. To combat obscurity, DeVille poured himself into his solo project, Samantha 7, while the band continued on with new guitarist Richie Kotzen. However, at the moment, it appeared impossible to mend the split between him and Poison, particularly with Michaels. As always, the answer could only be found in time and song. Was it only the beginning or was it truly the end? Reunion, rebirth, and collapse. In front of millions, the night Poison collapsed following the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards. With a broken career and a reputation marred by violence, drugs, and alcohol, CC DeVille left the band without saying a word. Sometimes people forgive rebels. However, DeVille was not referred to as an artist at the time. They referred to him as a saboteur. And nothing is more cruel in the rock industry than the limelight that once loved you turning its back on you. Over the ensuing years, CC bobbed in the dark. In 2000, he released a single album under the name Samantha 7. It was a weak echo of what he had previously constructed with Poison, but it wasn't a total disaster. In infrequent interviews, DeVille made an effort to remain positive. It was obvious. Beneath the well-known sarcasm lay a weary soul that was battling feelings of confusion and loneliness. By the mid-1990s, the majority of the makeup-wearing, teased hair bands had stopped playing as the grunge wave swept away what little glam metal was left. Then, however, something unexpected occurred. The band Poison, who were previously believed to be extinct, announced a reunion. And CC was the first person they contacted. DeVille. DeVille had accomplished what no one believed he was capable of by that point. He became sober. He returned to lucidity gradually and silently. Talking openly with himself, going to therapy, and finally receiving a call from Ricky Rocket. No glitz, no egos, no stage lights. Just a straightforward query. Are you all right? Poison, together with CC. For the Greatest Hits tour, DeVille formally got back together. It wasn't a victorious return. It was a test of forgiveness, friendship, and the capacity to get back up after everything. CC. With his ancient guitar and wary eyes, he took the stage for the first time in years. Then, however, the applause broke out. He didn't miss a single note this time, and the audience hadn't forgotten him. However, the road to recovery is never a straight one. Tensions erupted once more in 2000, this time because DeVille wanted Samantha Sevin to open for Poison's tour. Bret Michaels flatly declined. It must be all Poison if it is Poison. DeVille abruptly and silently departed the band, disappointed. I drove him back, Michaels recounted afterwards. We hugged, laughed, and said we would see each other in a few weeks. After that, I didn't hear from him ever again. 2 weeks later, however, DeVille was back. With a straightforward truth, not with an apology. With my band, I can perform for 18 people, and with Poison, I can perform for 18,000. For starters, he and the band both understood. Regardless of the number of engagements fought, CC. DeVille was an essential component of Poison. Rebellion was no longer the focus of this reunion. Acceptance was the key. They stopped attempting to alter one another. Despite their differences, they learned to live together. DeVille was quieter, sober, and listening to music with a strange serenity. He was now the caretaker of an old flame rather than the troublemaker. The flame that used to burn him is now handled carefully. Ever since, CC. Through numerous significant tours, compilation albums, and reunion performances, DeVille has stayed with Poison. That brought the glam metal era back to life. The crowd, however, saw him as more than just an artist this time. They viewed him as living evidence that certain flames, if they cannot be put out, need to be managed to prevent fatalities. Personal life outside of the spotlight, CC DeVille used to be the epitome of what a rock star could be. Numerous scandals, short-lived partnerships, and never-ending parties. He himself could hardly recall many of them. However, beneath that rebellious facade was a spirit that yearns for real connection, something DeVille hardly had in his prime. In the mid-1990s, CC returned to Poison after kicking addiction. Progressively left the limelight in favor of a more sedate and healthful lifestyle. Because of something new that had entered his universe, as well as the fact that he was tired. Family. DeVille and his longtime partner Shannon Malone welcomed their first child, a son named Valentino, into the world in 2007. The moment a once infamous musician stared in awe of his newborn child and realized that life will never be the same was a true turning point. It wasn't a hit song or a tour. DeVille freely acknowledged in subsequent interviews that he left the bustle of Hollywood and moved to a quiet California property by the sea. Week-long parties will be replaced by family time, school drop-offs, and guitar playing for fun rather than stress. The quiet partner, Shannon, is noted for supporting DeVille during both crisis and recuperation, despite her infrequent media appearances. She was more than just his girlfriend, she was the one who prevented him from going into a downward spiral. For a rock singer who used to live in a world of scandal, CC has hardly been embroiled in any love controversies since she started a family. He once stated, "I've lived crazy enough to know that stability isn't boring, it's a luxury," in a VH1 interview. It was still a full house, a place where he didn't have to perform or put on the mask of an artist, even though he never legally married Shannon to DeVille. As a father, a partner, and a guy who had survived fire, he made the decision to protect what was left of himself. In an era when early deaths, strained relationships, and personal catastrophes dominated the rock world, CC. Present life and legacy, now in his 60s, CC DeVille's decision to live a more modest and gentle life may be his last act of rebellion, but this time it's a revolt to stay true to himself. DeVille hasn't vanished, but he's also not the guitarist who used to jump over the stage in glistening leather suits like in Poison's heyday. Conversely, DeVille is now quieter, more mature, and more profound than before. The spotlight has given way to the gentle glow of daily living in California, where he resides with his partner Shannon Malone and their son Valentino. Throughout 2024 and 2025, CC. Even though he no longer participates in extensive tours, DeVille has maintained a strong connection to the music industry. A significant reunion tour with all of the original members, including DeVille, was originally scheduled for 2025, but it was cancelled when lead vocalist Bret Michaels took time off to concentrate on his health, especially managing his diabetes. Nevertheless, the band has stated that they will be back in 2026. DeVille will be an essential component of the milestone event, which will commemorate the 40th anniversary of their iconic record, Look What the Cat Dragged In. DeVille hasn't been idle, even off stage. He still attends charity performances, takes part in neighborhood events, and particularly encourages his son Valentino's musical endeavors, as he is reportedly carrying on his father's guitar and performing passions. He also stays active on social media, where he interacts with people directly, shares ordinary moments, and clings to what he once lost. Sincere relationship. CC. Despite not being the most technically skilled guitarist, DeVille is among the most important people in the glam metal movement. In addition to defining Poison's sound, his riffs, from Talk Dirty to Me to Unskinny Bop, became the very fabric of a musical generation associated with MTV, Hairspray, and late-night parties. DeVille disregarded academic conventions with his wild, raw, instinctual style of playing, demonstrating that personality and emotion can surpass skill. He transformed every performance into a spiritual and visual explosion by elevating the image of the renegade guitarist into stage art. His greatest legacy lies not in platinum records or accolades, but rather in the fact that he weathered the storms, grew up, and never lost himself. Few rock musicians of his generation can still describe his story, from getting fired for playing the wrong song on live television to being a sober guy who lives simply and is loyal to his family. And people continue to think of him even now whenever they hear a Poison riff. As CC, not as a flawless musician. DeVille, the live embodiment of a fierce, unrestrained era. CC DeVille leaves behind more than just riffs that became emblems of a musical age as he subtly exits the noisiest phase of his life. The journey he leaves behind is one of falling, rising, and maturing. His life serves as a warning. If you have the courage to face yourself, you may start afresh even if everything fails on the grandest stage. He didn't have to be flawless. CC. 4 people who have the courage to live genuinely, to resist, and to put things right. DeVille has emerged as a singular role model. He is a living example of what appears to be straightforward. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply surviving. CC. DeVille will always be a vital component of glam metal, a unique figure in rock history, and a source of motivation for anyone who has ever felt they have gone too far to go back. What are your thoughts about CC? DeVille's tumultuous yet valiant voyage? What do you think was his most memorable moment in his career? Join us in discovering more undiscovered tales of music legends by leaving your opinions in the comments section below, liking, and subscribing. Thank you for viewing. I'll see you in the upcoming video.